everyone, it's Bridget here from Bridget's Kitchen, wishing you a very happy Monday if it's Monday in your part of the world, a very happy Sunday if it's Sunday in your part of the world, and I know that some people watching are still experiencing Sunday, but a very happy Queen's birthday weekend to Australia, who is celebrating today, which is Monday here in Sydney. We're celebrating a day off, a public holiday, celebrate the Queen's birthday, and I thought, what better thing to share with you guys than something so English it's almost not funny, and that is a scone recipe. So this morning at about 5 a.m. Sydney time, I shared with you the actual recipe for my great Aunt Edna's famous scones, except I just made a few little alterations. I'm sure she wouldn't be too upset with me that I've made a few alterations to her wonderful scone recipe. Aunt Edna was famous for her scones, and literally she was the type of person, she didn't have any of her own children, her and her husband, my Uncle Champ. They would always come over home and they would look after us kids, or would go and stay at their place, but she was the most amazing baker, and I remember the smell of her house because it always smelled like something really, really good was happening in her kitchen. So this is an ode to my great Aunt Edna, who passed away many years ago, but she's well into her 90s before she passed away, and she definitely handed down some of her cooking prowess, I think, to me, because the day that I was born, here's a little story for you. The day that I was born, Aunt Edna came over to my mum and dad's house to look after my brothers and sisters who are older than me, because obviously mum was a little bit busy and she couldn't look after the kids. So great Aunt Edna came over home and she looked after my brothers and my sister, and while she was there, as legend would have it, she started to bake her famous scones. So I always like to think that her being at home while mum was busy giving birth to me has helped me to become the chef I am today, because I've always been surrounded by food, and I like to think that I was literally born with a scone in my hand thanks to my great Aunt Edna. So this, as I was saying, this is kind of her recipe, as in there's still some elements of the technique that she used all those many years ago, and that people who have made traditional scones before, you'll still find some of these techniques really familiar. The main difference is, and what I have done here, and I hope I haven't upset anyone up there, the main thing that I have done is I have removed the gluten from the scones. Now the reason why I have personally removed the gluten is because I'm not celiac, so I'm not gluten intolerant, but I am very gluten sensitive. And I only discovered this, I had no idea, like for the first 43 years of my life, I'm like, yeah, give me all the bread, give me all the pasta and all the muffins, everything's going to be great. And it wasn't until I actually removed the gluten from my diet, so no more pasta, no more white bread, no more brown bread, took away the muffins, took away the cookies, things that you would traditionally find gluten in, scones as well, that I realized that I was extremely sensitive to gluten. Gluten would always make me really bloated. It would actually make me feel really uncomfortable, and it wasn't until I removed it from my diet, realized how good I felt, thought I could sneak some gluten back in, and then went, oh, I get it now. I get it. Gluten makes me feel like rubbish. So the main thing I've done with this particular scone recipe is I have removed the gluten, but I have not removed the flavor, and I have not removed the satisfaction, because one of the things about eating a scone hot from the oven is that wonderful satisfaction we get of taking the top off and it's all steaming and hot. That's what you want, and we can still achieve this with this recipe that I've created. So what I'm going to give for you guys today, and hello to everyone who's joined me today. Good to see you guys, whether you're at work or you're having a holiday like we are in our house. Thank you for joining me. So with this recipe, I have removed the gluten. I've kept a very similar technique, but I've also removed the dairy. If anyone wants a dairy-free option, I will give you options for both. Now, the ones that I'm making today are not going to be dairy-free, but you can make a dairy-free scone recipe, which is so exciting. It's pretty exciting, right? Okay, so I'm going to bring the camera down so you guys can have a little bit of a look at what's happening down on my board here, on my bench. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, or to start off with, is behind me, not in the microwave, on the other side there, that's my oven. You can kind of see it in the corner there. I have my oven already set at 220 degrees Celsius, which is around about 440, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't think that's exact, but it's around about there. So 220 degrees Celsius is actually really, really hot. And we need our oven to be hot. And what I've also done is I've taken the wire shelf in the oven and I've put it into the top third of the oven, so it's sitting a little bit higher, not in the middle, just a little bit higher. And the reason I've done that is heat rises, and our scones need a really good blast of heat to get them going. And at the same time, I've got my oven preheating at 220 degrees Celsius. I've already got a heavy oven tray heating up there as well. So that's the first thing you want to do. Oven goes on, tray goes in, metal rack goes into the top third of the oven. Remember, hot air rises. So into our bowl. The recipe, by the way, guys, is so incredibly simple. Like this is, and one of the I know there is some school of thought out there that scones are really hard to make. When you take the gluten out, they're not. It's amazing, right? Gluten is what makes them hard. So what I have in here is 250 grams of flour. Gluten-free flour, goes in. Of course it's gluten-free flour. That goes in first. Now you can buy a pre-made gluten-free flour mix, or you can make your own. Just Google how to make my own gluten-free flour. It's actually heaps cheaper if you make your own. You just need a couple of ingredients and you're away laughing. But if you don't have time or whatever, you can buy your own gluten-free flour mix. That goes into the bowl. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take even though this is actually a self-raising gluten-free flour mix, so there's already a raising agent in there, I like to just beef it up a little bit because I always find it not quite as strong as I would like. So I'm going to add in a teaspoon of baking powder as well. Goes into that. Give that a little bit of a stir. See, it's pretty easy. I told you it's an easy recipe, like literally. Give it a bit of a stir. A little bit of salt, just a sprinkle of salt. Himalayan salt goes in there too. I'm actually going to get something to stir it with now. Traditionally, we make scones with knives. So give that a bit of a stir. Those are the 3 dry ingredients that go into our scone recipe. That is all there is to it. The only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in the liquid. So if you are doing a dairy-free version of this, in this bowl, in this little jug here, you would have coconut cream, and you would also have sparkling or mineral water. So just carbonated water. That's if you're doing the dairy-free version. If you're doing the dairy version, which is what I'm doing, I've got whole cream or full cream, and I've got the sparkling carbonated water in there as well. But that's what that liquid is. The only last step we need to do before the liquid goes in there is I need to rub in the fat content. So I'm going to go over to my fridge, because purposely I left my butter in cubes in the fridge because your butter wants to be cold. And this is the traditional part, is we're still going to rub the butter into the dry ingredients. Now, if you are doing a dairy-free version, this would be hard coconut oil. So there's about 40 grams of butter, hard, in cubes, or coconut oil, hard, goes into there. And then using clean fingertips, you just want to begin to rub the butter. And what's happening when we're rubbing it is we're distributing the butter through the dry ingredients. Don't be afraid to get fingers a little bit mucky here. It's all part of the wonders of baking and of cooking, is you are allowed to make a bit of a mess. This is, by the way, such a good recipe to introduce kids into the kitchen with, grandkids, little kids, because they do get to get a little bit messy, not too messy, but a little bit messy is good, you know, and it's hands-on because they get to rub in the fat, whether it be butter or whether it be coconut oil. They actually get to rub it in. And when you're doing this type of action, you know, and you are so hands-on, cooking becomes even more tactile. Kids get it, right? So this is a great recipe if you've got the grandkids at home today, or you've got the kids at home and you want to keep them busy, get them to make some of my Aunt Edna's gluten-free scones. That's just like, it's easy to do. Just watch them when it goes over to the oven, but you guys know that. But this step here is a great job for little hands, because little hands can get into the bowl really easy. So this is a great one for kids. So the rubbing in just means we're distributing the flour. The reason we do it, remember, with hard butter or hard oil is because if I put soft butter in there, we wouldn't actually be able to distribute it as easy. So that's why we use, and you do need to work fast here, especially if you're using coconut oil, because it doesn't take much for that to actually go down into more of a liquid form, which is not ideal. So I'm pretty happy with that now. If I have a little look through it, it looks like it's pretty evenly distributed through the dry ingredients. I'm now going to make a bit of a well, which is, I always found this fascinating when I was a kid. I always thought of, obviously the well where you'd go to get the water, but there is a reason why we're making a little hole in the middle there, once again, so we can evenly distribute out the liquid through the flour. Now I am going to make a bit of a mess. There you go. Clean hands now. All right, back to our liquid. So remember, in here I have 125 mils of carbonated sparkling water, no sugar, no flavor, just plain sparkling water. You could use plain mineral water, completely up to you. I also have 125 mils of cream, of pouring cream. Remember, if you want to do the dairy-free version, this would then be coconut cream. You could also get away with coconut milk. Won't be quite as rich, but you can definitely get away with it. So that goes into the well. We pour the water into the well, just like that. And then going back to tradition, this is what I was always taught to use to stir the scone mixture together. And the reason being, I believe, is that we were taught to do that is because traditional scones, so these are the ones with gluten, you don't want to overwork the dough, because when you overwork the dough, the gluten starts to firm up and your scones are hard, and that is obviously not ideal. You don't want hard scones. So that's why this is such an easy recipe to do. You don't have to use a knife. You could literally use a spoon or a wooden spoon or whatever. Because there's no gluten in this mixture, there is no chance of us overworking it. So what that basically means is that our scones are never going to have the chance to go really hard, because remember, we've taken out the gluten, and it is the gluten in traditional scones which make them firm if you overwork them. How cool is that? Right, I'm going to get rid of this board so you guys can see what the next step is. So at the moment I've got, I've got a soft dough, but it needs to come together a bit more. So the best way to do that is to lightly flour, just with a little bit more of that gluten-free flour. Lightly flour your bench. Can you guys, I'll work down here so you can see. Lightly flour your bench, and then we're going to turn our dough out onto the bench. Now, depending on the type of flour that you use, the type of gluten-free flour will determine the absorbing rate of the liquid. So for some of you, you might find that your dough is a little bit crumbly, so then just add just a little bit more liquid, like a teaspoon at a time of the carbonated water. For some of you, you might find that with my recipe, your dough is a little bit, so if it's crumbly, you add the liquid. If it is wet, you add more dry. So just remember that all flours are not created equal. So they absorb, some absorb more liquid, some absorb less. I'm really happy with my dough and how it feels now. Look at that, you see? This is the fun part, and this is why you need to get the kids involved. This is so good. Oh, I love this. Is why I love cooking, because like I said, it's hands-on. You get to experience it, and then you get to eat it. It's so good, right? Okay, so I'm really happy with that dough. See, it's soft, it's pliable, but it's not sticking wet to my fingers. I can actually put it like that and pick it up, and it's not sticking to the board as well. So this is the ideal texture you want for your dough. Remember, if it's too crumbly, add a bit more liquid, 1 tablespoon at a time. If it's too wet, add a bit more flour. Just sprinkle it on until it comes and it looks like that for you. So that's a great little a little sign that your dough is now ready to move on to the next step. So you see that I've kind of, remember with scones I would be freaking out right now, because I've been touching it and prodding it and playing with it, and guaranteed if I was making traditional scones right now, those scones will be tough. We'll be able to use them to build a house. But because we've taken out the gluten, I can be a little bit more carefree, and that's why I said this is so good for kids, because they're going to get a great product. Even if they play around with it and knead it and treat it like Play-Doh, they're still going to get a really, really good end product. So into a round, we now shape our dough. And what we want to do now is we want to take a little rolling, oh here it is, a little rolling pin, a little mini rolling pin, and we're just going to roll the dough out. Now you don't want to roll it too thin. You're only going to get depending on the size of your cutter that you're going to use, you're only maybe going to get sort of, it's starting to stick a little bit to my rolling pin, so I'm just going to flour it up a little bit. You're probably, like with my cutter, I only get, this is the size cutter that I use, I only get 6, they're quite large, so you may only get sort of 6 to maybe 8 or 9 scones out of this, because you, like I said, you don't want to roll it too flat, because otherwise you will literally get flat little scones. And because one of the downsides about taking out the gluten is they don't puff up as much. Try and say that 3 times. They don't puff up as much, so that's why you can see that I've actually got quite a thick piece of dough there. Right, okay, so once you're happy with the height, I'm saying that's about 10 centimeters. That's what I'm kind of looking at. It's about an inch. Give it a little bit of a pat. Once again, this is my favorite part, just playing with the food. It's always a fun part. Okay, taking my cutter. Now you don't have to use a cutter. You can go uber traditional and just cut them. And I think with my Aunt Edna, she always had them in diamond shapes, usually, or sometimes they were in triangles. You can use your knife, and that's nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to go a little bit fancy today. We're going to have some round scones. So the first thing I need to do is just take a little bit of my gluten-free flour, make a little pile on the bench. Just like, can you guys see that little, no you can't, here it is, there's a little pile on the bench, because what you need to do is you need to make sure that your cutter is sufficiently floured so that it doesn't stick to the dough when we snap these scones out. And I'm using the word snap very intentionally, because one of the secrets, whether you're making traditional scones or gluten-free, my gluten dairy-free ones, is we need to snap the cutter into the dough. So literally I'm going to snap it like that, and when I snap it, I actually hear the air that's been trapped inside by the baking powder and the raising agent. I hear that air, and that air is fantastic. I want to hear it, because what that means is, you can see the sides of this, if I didn't snap it in and I kind of twisted, that would actually make the sides stick together and you won't get a rise out of it. So when you snap it in, you hear the air come back at you, you're going to get a better rise out of your scone. So that's a really important little step. So once again, this goes into the flour to make sure it's lovely and floured. There, our little cutter. And we're going to snap it in again. Remember, and no twisting. Bring it straight out. You do not want to twist, because twisting the cutter is going to mean that those layers are going to compress and the scone is going to be harder to rise. And that, like I said, that is traditional scones, and that is these ones as well. But always just give it a little bit of a tap, a little bit of a snap. So this one's actually got a little crescent shaped out of it. That's okay. And like I said, depending on the size of your cutter will determine if your cut, this is huge. You could go half the size of that and get 12 really cool little sort of almost like afternoon tea style scones out of it. And because once again, this is a gluten-free mix, there is nothing stopping me from doing this. So taking those leftovers or those cut-offs and then starting all over again. The reason why we don't tend to like to do that when we're making traditional scones is, once again, you're playing with the dough. And when you're playing with the dough, you are stopping the rise because the gluten doesn't like it, and you are also making the scones really, really tough. But remember, when it comes to our gluten-free ones, we've taken away the gluten, so it's absolutely fine. Once again, back to our cutter, a little bit of flour on the bench, and remember, snap it in. You can hear the air hit back up at you, which is really important. So that's a lovely one. And then with this last one, I'm just going to bring it together. There's always a kind of a sad little one that kind of is the end of the pack, but that's all right. It's going to taste fantastic. Doesn't matter if he's a little bit sad. And those are our scones cut out, ready to go. Now, in order to get a lovely glaze on them, can you guys? I'll bring them in here. In order to get a lovely glaze on them, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to take the remnants of my jug here. So remember, this was cream or coconut cream if you're doing the dairy free. Taking a little pastry brush and just brush the tops of your scones, which is going to help them to caramelize and get all lovely and golden while they are in the oven, which is important. And you're not wasting anything, which is cool as well, all right? That was just, you know, the ends, the dregs of the jug, so to speak, and we're making sure that we're using all those ends up, and we're going to get a lovely wonderful glaze on our scones as they come out of the oven. And one of the great things about scones is when they come out of the oven. Like, this is one of those recipes that you need to eat straight out of the oven. So, you know, assemble the troops when it's almost time for them to come out, because straight out of the oven is definitely the best. All right, so we've got the glaze on them. I'm going to shoot over to the oven now and grab the hot baking sheet that I was talking about at the beginning. Remember, we want this baking sheet to be hot, because that is also going to help our scones in that rising, when they go into a hot oven on a hot sheet, it's going to help them to rise, because they don't need very long in the oven. Bit of a sprinkle of the flour just to stop them from sticking. You can hear, I don't know if you can hear that, but they are just sizzling as they go onto my hot oven tray. And it is quite a thick one too, so no chance of it buckling. It's nice and thick. Over to the oven they go. And they are going to be in there. I'll come back up so you guys can say, hey guys. They're going to be in there, depending on your oven. I want to get hair out of my mouth, but I've got stuff flew in my face. They're going to be in there. They're going to be in there for between 14 to 18 minutes. I know that's a big time frame, but the reason being is, once again, not every oven is created the same. So even my oven, I find, runs really, really hot. So when I set something at 220 degrees, it tends to take around at the lower end of the scale about 14 minutes for my scones to cook. I made these scones last weekend. We're in the Hunter Valley as well. The oven in the house we were staying at was running quite slow, so it actually took more like 18 minutes. So keep an eye on it. How you will know whether your scones are ready or not is because they get lovely and golden on the top. Remember, they will rise. They won't rise as much as the traditional scones, but you'll also have the ability to do this. And this is what I want, one of those, and here's some I made earlier, right? So here is the cooked scone. You can see we got a bit of a rise out of that. But one of the reasons you can tell it's done is it's got this lovely golden color on top. It's lovely underneath as well. When you tap it, it sounds like it's hollow. And then you should be able to just do this, is they just naturally like break in half. So then you have two pieces like that. So that's the scones, right? That's how you know. And then you can have a look inside and you can investigate and go, yeah, that crumb actually looks cooked through really, really well. And remember, that took 14 minutes. So that's scones, aka biscuits in the States. Remember, gluten-free and dairy-free if you want them. Sugar-free, of course, there's no sugar in there. But I want to also show you guys one more thing while our scones are working. Oh, I better ask. Okay, Google, set alarm for 12 minutes. Apologies if I set anyone's phone off just there.
Set for 1:18 p.m.
All right, there we go. Apologies if anyone else's phone just went crazy because I said the H Google word, the voice command. All right, back down here, because I'm just going to show you guys a really quick way to clean up. This I call my bulldozer, because this is the best thing for cleaning up sticky surfaces, especially if the kids have been in there. It literally catches everything, and all you need to do is bulldozer it off the side. It's actually not called a bulldozer, it's just what I call it, because it bulldozes all the mess, and I love it. I want to show you guys one more thing before we go. And what are we going to put on top of our scones? Really important, right? What goes on top? So traditionally scones are cream. If we're doing a Devonshire scone, because it's the Queen's birthday, I thought it would be a little bit traditional. You do whipped cream, which is what I have here. I have some whipped cream. I actually sweetened my cream with a little bit of inulin powder as well, a little bit of whipped cream and inulin powder. You, instead of, if you're going dairy free, coconut yogurt, would you believe, with a little bit of inulin in it, just to sweeten it. Remember, inulin is not a sugar, it is a dietary fiber. So you can increase the dietary fiber content in your cream or your coconut yogurt without having any sugar in it. So my cream here has just been whipped up lovely and really, really firm, almost like a clotted cream. And I've got a little bit of inulin in there. You could also put a bit of vanilla essence or vanilla extract in there to give it a bit of a vanilla flavour. But what goes with Devonshire scones is cream whipped. Of course, you could just do butter, or you could just do coconut, or you could do what I have in here. Would you believe, is a couple of minutes before I went live, I thought I would make my own sugar-free berry jam. So in this pot here, I have, and it literally I'll explain it to you, it's so simple. I put frozen berries into here. I basically filled the pot up with frozen berries. This is probably, let's just say maybe 500 grams, maybe not even that, maybe 400 grams of frozen berries went in here, and they're mixed berries too, mixed berries, so there's blueberries and raspberries and strawberries in there. I then put in a tablespoon of inulin powder. Remember, it helps to sweeten it, but it's not a sugar, it's not an artificial sweetener, it's 100% natural, it's a dietary fiber, it's a soluble fiber, it'll help to melt the fat around your organs, I love inulin, and it helps to make this jam a little bit sweet. And then to thicken my jam, I put the berries in and then the inulin. I put the pot on the stove and I just left it on there on medium heat for about 5 minutes until the berries just begin to release that juice that you see there. So that's all natural. There's no water in there. This is just what came out of the berries. And then when I got it to that stage, remember inulin and berries, just a little bit of heat, it started to release that awesome juice. I took it off the heat and I added in 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. Now chia seeds are really good protein, so they're really, really good for us, but they also have the ability to make things thick. So this has thickened my berry jam. So what I could do now is I could literally just use that on top of the scones if I wanted to, or you could do this, which is what I'm gonna do, is take up your little food processor and you can add these inside here. Obviously, add the berries and the chia and a little bit of inulin. Just spoon it in and then give it a little bit of a blend. And you'll be more like a jam consistency when you do that. Ooh, where's my... I'm going to bring it over. Here we go. So what we have now, and I've kept it... You could go quite pureed, but I quite like that. I think that is just a really nice consistency. There's some thickness in there. Actually, it's thickened up really, really nicely. So now we have jam, just like that. You have jam without any sugar. You have jam. It's great, right? I'm going to keep that too because I like the big pieces as well. So let's plate up so you can see what's going on. I'm going to grab myself a very appropriate plate from over here. A very appropriate, hopefully clean plate from over here. Okay, yep, all right. So here's my plate. I'm then going to take my scone. Remember, we're going traditional here. So we're going to make Devonshire scones. Taking a spoon of the whipped cream. Oh yeah. That is I've got to say, that is a huge scone, I've just realised. Because even my big tablespoon of cream's like being swallowed up by how big the scone is. I'll add a little bit more. And then of course we're going to go over and we're just going to add a lovely little spoon of our homemade berry chia sugar-free jam on top of our wonderful little scone. Look at that. And that has literally taken me, well, I don't even know, I think it's like 20 minutes. You're going to have hot scones from the oven with whipped cream. You can make this jam in 5 minutes time. It's so easy. In fact, I'll share the recipe with you guys on Bridget's Kitchen. If you want the full recipe for the scones, the very first recipe I shared this morning, Aunt Edna's gluten-free scones, is on the page. You can request the recipe. PDF will be sent out to you on Messenger. If not, rewatch the video because all the ingredients are in there. But if you could see what I can see now, like on the other side of the camera, the troops are beginning to assemble. It's time to eat scones. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful weekend, long weekend, or if you're back at work, get someone to make you some scones. These are fantastic. All right, guys, love you lots. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.